So our speaker is going to be Miha Tiutin, CTO at PureFi. He's a blockchain expert specializing in smart contract design and development. Over the past 7 years, he's collaborated with enterprises and startups to leverage smart contracts for decentralized solutions. Notable contributions include playing a key role in establishing a smart contract-based property registry in the United States and introducing a DeFi compliance protocol. More recently, he focuses on addressing privacy and compliance challenges in DeFi through zero-knowledge protocols, ensuring decentralized protocols function with regulatory frameworks while preserving user privacy. So please welcome Mike.
Thank you for introduction. It's kind of boring thing comparing to previous discussion about Doom, but anyway, we have to talk about compliance because in another way authorities come and you will have to talk with them about compliance. So that's why we're here and talking about compliance in DeFi. So let's start. What compliance in crypto is? Compliance in crypto is all about addresses. Who transacted, with whom transacted, what's the history of transaction of specific address, what are the source of funds that came to this address, who are the addresses that this particular address was transacting with. There are companies on the market that actually collecting this data out of different blockchains, profiling this data, aggregating this data, doing assessment of this data, and then they sell this data into the market. So these companies are well established and they exist for quite a while. What they're also doing is kind of risk scoring addresses. So risk score of the address is combined criteria or characteristics of the address that embed all the historical data of what address been transacting with and source of funds and stuff like that. So how do they sell this data? How they provide this data? They provide this data in two ways, either with a specific software that you have to buy and use as a, let's say, KYC or AML officer on exchange, or you may use their RPC endpoints and they query this data out of their endpoints. So talking about compliance in DeFi. So this is kind of an interesting thing because it doesn't exist legally. It doesn't exist legally because there is no legal framework for DeFi set. So no regulation, no requirements, and no supervision as of today. So whatever exists doesn't work for DeFi. What we've been talking about previously is all about profiling addresses and stuff like that. It doesn't work for DeFi as of today. Why? Because it's not available for smart contracts. DeFi is about smart contracts. Smart contract has to query the data. That data is not available for smart contracts. Whatever works is not used. So there have been few efforts of somehow providing this data to smart contract level. This effort has been done for a few years, starting from oracles provided by Chainalysis and other different protocols, including PureFi. But there is no big demand, I would say, from the market to this data. Why? Because of point number one, no regulation framework. Compliance protocols for DeFi are mainly constructed as a circuit breaker. What does it mean? It means that when you're doing transaction in DeFi protocol, there should be a circuit breaker that prevents your transaction to be included into blockchain and your funds, let's say, pooled unless there is a verification of these funds. So any single compliance protocol is a circuit breaker. Every single compliance protocol performs off-chain verification. Why? Because the amount of data that has to be verified is huge. It doesn't exist completely on-chain. So talking about KYC, for example, so documents don't exist on-chain. So that's why they have to be validated off-chain. And then, after all, there is a proof that is computed off-chain, and somehow this proof becomes available on-chain and it's consumed by the smart contract. And if this proof is valid, then transactions follows. If the proof is not valid, this is circuit breaker. So this is a typical architecture of compliance protocol in DeFi. So there is a user, there is a customer web application or dApp, and there is a verification service, which is purple. And then this customer's dApp requests the verification on the verification service. This service compiles a proof, sends this proof back. This proof is injected into transaction as a code data normally. And then this transaction is broadcasted to blockchain and executed by customer's smart contract. So how does customer smart contract validate this proof? Via the verifier smart contract. That's obvious. So this might not be essentially ZK verifier smart contract, but this can be simple, starting from simplest signature check up to, let's say, ZK verifier. So this is a practical example. So this is PureFi architecture in essence. It's way more complex as far as you see, but as an example, something practical, let's say. So this is a privacy protocol, and it's basic architecture on very, very high level. So you have a user, your user has a wallet, and there is some circuit. Circuit is compiled into two things, prover and the verifier. Verifier is computed in the user environment. Prover is computed on the user environment, and the verifier stands on chain. So normal privacy protocol nowadays use relayers. Who knows why protocols rely on relayers? What the problem is solved with relayers? Privacy, yeah, exactly. So somebody has to broadcast transaction. If the user broadcasts transaction with his own address, it's way less private. So that's why users rely on relayers to, would say, to bundle and upload these transactions on chain. Okay, so, and then this transaction appears in blockchain, proof is verified by ZK verifier, and then it triggers ERC20 transfer and stuff like that. So this is typical, very typical architecture. What if you try to use compliance protocol along with privacy protocol? So this is kind of obvious thing. This is number one that you normally do. So this architecture results in a outcome that gas cost of the relayer transaction would include both compliance verification and privacy protocol verification. But the worst thing of all is that you have to somehow pass this proof of compliance protocol verification through the relayer on chain, and this is painful, frankly speaking. So this is the next version that emerges out of this effort. Let's say, what if we use compliance proof inside privacy protocol circuit? So can we validate the compliance proof inside the prover of a privacy protocol? And if yes, then we can embed this verification into ZK prover and do not transfer in on chain. So this architecture results in way more efficient gas consumption. And this is actually the way that we recommend privacy protocol to use compliance tools right now. So what is a good thing about all that is that the no gas consumption increase for compliance data verification. It's all about ZK verification for privacy protocol. It's way better level of privacy, because if there is a compliance proof on chain, at least you know that it has been done. Right now, you even do not know it has been done. It's way better. But there are some drawbacks, like in order to have proof verified inside the circuit prover, you have to change underlying cryptography. You have to do it compliant with ZK, for example, changing hash to Poseidon, changing signature to curve to baby jub and stuff like that. So it's an extra complexity for ZK circuit development. So this is a practical example, I would say. As you see, it's a little bit different and way more complex. It includes both subscription checks, because we have to charge money for our service, and it's also adapted for Panther protocol. I don't think it's actually okay. So question and answers, and first of all, I probably would start from two questions that already arise here in audience, during the audience, and then we will continue to the other questions. So first question that I've been asked today is, who is actually behind the data? Who keeps the data? Do we keep the data? Because the regulation that is standing on traditional financial market, it requires company to do KYC. It doesn't require companies to have a proof of age, proof of residence, proof of whatever. It stands for having know your customer. You have to ask for the data, exactly the data, not the proof. So how do we deal with that in PureFi? So we are the data storage. We have a GDPR compliant service, which is in the cloud and which keeps the data. When we serve the protocol, which is essentially on-chain and doesn't have its own backend, it's just smart contracts and front end, so we keep the data for this protocol. So if, let's say, authorities knock at the door of the protocol and ask for a particular address, you have a hash of KYC proof that we have sent to you. And you can, let's say, you could store this hash even in blockchain, because it's just a hash, it's an identifier. So in particular transaction, you can log this hash into events, and then you just send us this hash, and we extract the data. So this is what we do. And this is practical way of doing things. I'm 100% to change the regulations the way that we need a proof instead of actually data. But as of today, the only practical way to use a proof is when you're buying alcohol in grocery shop. They're actually required to make sure you are above certain age. They're not required to keep your data, and that's it. So this is the only place in the world right now that is allowed to use ZK proof for any kind of business operation. Okay, let's continue with other questions.
Thanks. So I guess just on that point, would it not make sense to have potentially a setup where you have multiple independent entities that control a key to the data, for instance, where they would have to collaborate only with the regulator, for instance?
Good question. I think that the major problem here that if you have encrypted the data with a key, you cannot change the key unless you re-encrypt it once again. So this is the point. So practically, it would be very hard to achieve, assuming how much KYC verification per day we are doing. So I think this is the main point here. So other than that, sharing keys with authorities, I think the rotation of these keys would be the problem.
Just a suggestion, I know we looked at this problem for Panther, so I'm very aware of the constraints. Mm-hmm. So, just out of curiosity, I'm not asking you to do that tomorrow, okay? just thinking out loud here. Like, you can actually have windows, as in for a set of transactions in one window, you can actually do derived keys and things like that. So every time, even if there has to be an exposure in that sense, it's like you hand the keys over to an authority, they can actually then look at that window rather than the whole, forward security in that sense. Does it make sense to you? So the keys reveal, then they have a window of opportunity to see something. Then if they want to have another look at it, they need to come back to you, or you plus a set of agreed participants with a legal thing. Then they can reconstruct the key. Then they can look at a window and then
Window in credential.
yeah,
I mean.
yes, yeah.
Okay. So it's not the way regulation works, first of all, unfortunately. We are a part of effort of creating new regulation for DeFi right now in European Union, and we are actually trying to move them to proofs out of KYC, at least for DeFi. But this is hard to do. We're still discussing replication of travel rule with them, which doesn't work in crypto effectively, but this is how it is. So regulators are very slow. So they're even slower than, do you remember that movie Zootopia? They're even slower.
I have a question about if there's a market for tooling like this that's not like strictly compliant, but like I'm just thinking of in the context of something like privacy pools, where KYC is kind of just a deterrent for bad actors to enter a system, and then it can lend some credibility. Like maybe it's not going to be strictly compliant if a regulator comes and asks for like information about a specific user. The protocol wouldn't be able to provide that, but you could basically do exclusion sets or something to allow people to participate. Have you explored that at all?
So basically, what we do is verifications in PureFi are rule-based. When we are talking to our customers, first of all, we define the verification rules. They depend on the jurisdiction that you operate as a protocol, if you have the jurisdiction, because kind of crypto might not have jurisdiction. Let's say, what's the jurisdiction of Tornado Cash is? Nobody knows. But essential point is, if you do not prevent illegal activities following through your protocol, after all, you will be in trouble. So this is the main point. So guys who are behind Tornado Cash are unfortunately in jail. What about Ethereum? So Ethereum is, first of all, there is a court decision in the United States which states that every single transaction in Ethereum is conducted to be in the United States jurisdiction. So it's a very interesting point. First of all, after all, majority of Ethereum validators as of today are excluding FAQ sanctioned addresses. And if you follow through the dashboard, this node is clearly marked. So this doesn't prevent, let's say, fraud, but you cannot go into jail for fraud. So this doesn't, but this prevents some criminal activities, definitely.
So given the glacial pace at which the regulatory authorities are moving, right, and it's understandable, like where do you see product market fit for this first? Like what are the specific jurisdictions or specific types of protocol where you see like, yes, they need this immediately?
For compliance protocols.
Exactly.
Privacy pools first, because somebody is in jail, first of all. Secondly, I would say DeFi swap protocols. So I will probably uncover one more interesting topic is how probably DeFi will be regulated. This is still my point. But if you're interested in, let's say, I think that liquidity providers are the only people who could be effectively regulated. So protocol designers and companies that are behind this protocol as a developers probably will not be regulated. Why? Because they cannot regulate. You always can say that, okay, I created this contract and did a push on a GitHub. That's it. I have no idea who exactly deployed this protocol on chain. You can deploy the protocol that nobody will know who have deployed the protocol. But for DeFi to work, you need liquidity, and this liquidity is provided by a person or entity, and effective liquidity nowadays is 100,000 plus if you want to make money. And you can effectively regulate people or companies who are providing liquidity. So this is the first point. Second point, there is so-called VASP, Virtual Asset Service Provider, and the regulation is based over this term. And DeFi protocol would be a virtual asset service provider if it satisfies criteria. If, let's say, you are a service provider behind smart contract, if you satisfy criteria. So these criteria, as far as I remember, you extract profit, or you have deployed the protocol. So we effectively know that you can avoid being a person who deployed the protocol, but and you can avoid being a person or company who would say extract the profit. Let's say Uniswap has profit extraction function even in version 2, but they have not enabled this function. If they enable this function, they would be virtual asset service provider, regulation, and stuff like that. So, but they have not enabled this function. But now try to think of a liquidity provider from the same perspective of these criteria. Is liquidity provider a person or entity extracting profit out of the protocol? Then liquidity provider can be considered a virtual asset service provider. And if a liquidity provider will be considered a virtual asset service provider, they will migrate, after all, to protocols that will do compliance for them. As a liquidity provider on Uniswap, you cannot do compliance for Uniswap users. Whoever will be swapping on Uniswap, you cannot reach this person. You cannot prevent this person using your liquidity in any way. So my point here is, I think that in future, DEXs will be regulated, because liquidity provider will move to DEXs that will be regulated. That's the point. Any other questions? Okay.
Don't think we have any other questions, so thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much.
Give a big hand.